everyone. Happy New Year. Thanks for being here. I am impressed by the size and energy of the crowd, considering it is our first Sunday of 2026. So thank you again for being here. I'm Meredith Cornett with the fabulous Forums team. And we have our very first, not only speaker of the season with us today, but our first woven basket recipient, which is very exciting. So, of course, we all have a chance to give to our woven basket recipients during the service, but we also will pass the basket around towards the end of today as well, just to kind of kick things off. So a little preliminary giving, should you be so moved, but it is my great pleasure to introduce Jeff Corey today. He can tell you more details about himself, but I've met him on and off over the years, just really interested in One Roof Community Housing and all that they do. So it's just great to be able to listen more in depth to this presentation today. But I am gonna hand things over to you now, Jeff. Also, I will be checking my phone during this whole thing just to see if there are questions coming in from the Zoom audience. So please don't think that I am just a distracted teenager looking at my phone the whole time. That's because I'm looking at it. Either way, and thank you so much for being here. Well, I'll get with this one.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Right up your mouth.
Right up here, is that okay? Nice to be with you this morning. I'm Jeff Corey. I'm the executive director at One Roof Community Housing. Been there for longer than One Roof has been in existence. I came from the land trust side. We're a merger in 2012, so I'm 27-ish years on the job. I like to tell folks I started when I was 14. I'm legally blind, and so for folks that are online, hopefully my face doesn't scare you as I go forward to see what's on the screen periodically, and I'm just also not really great at recognizing folks. So pardon if we pass each other later today and I don't have the ability to recognize you, but that's just me. So I'm going to talk a bit about housing today from a little bit of a systems perspective, and then I'll talk a bit about what One Roof does, and hopefully we'll have a bit of time at the end to kind of circle back to the system sort of things and what we can do here in our community about housing. So I'll just jump in. So like I said, One Roof is the product of a merger. In 2012, we brought Northern Communities Land Trust and Neighborhood Housing Services together to be one entity. And the notion was if we could do all of the work that the two organizations did from the same place, we could more efficiently serve the community. When we had the first conversation about it with our board, one of our board members, we have community land trust homeowners on our board of directors. One of them said, you know, if I could have gone to the same place to get my home buyer education and counseling, my down payment assistance, and my land trust house, that would have been the best for me. And right around the room, everybody tipped over like dominoes and said, we better explore this if that's what's best for the folks that we're here to help. We're a nonprofit organization, so we have a staff of about 35 if you count our construction company crew folks, and we have about five or six people that typically are working in the field doing construction work, and then the rest of us are mostly office workers. Board of directors, that's about 14, 15 people, and then really importantly is we've got a really great team. A really great board, but we couldn't do what we do if there weren't folks in the community leaning into the work with us. So whether that's lenders or attorneys or title people or realtors, other organizations like the Housing Authority, other nonprofits, we could not do what we do if we were just One Roof and nobody was leaning into it with us. So, and our primary sort of like tagline is we make home a better place. All of the things that we do are about making home better for people. And And there's a really specific reason for why that's our focus. We know that in order for people to be the best versions of themselves, they need to be able to have a place to be safe, to be at home, to sleep, to have as their platform from which they can operate in the world. So if you think about someone who's underhoused or badly housed or not housed, and the stress associated with that, how does one get out of bed every day and decide to, go do your work, go to school, be a parent, all of those things. If you're not well housed, it's all of that stuff is very, very much harder. So we know that's true, and so we believe we have a responsibility to lean into helping as many people as possible in our community have a good place to live. And part of that reason is because our communities operate better if everybody is coming from that place, right? So it's not just about like helping a family, but also what that family can do for the community if they're better housed than if they're not. We also know that increasingly the challenge gets harder. A few years ago, some of my pals were going to head up the shore for lunch on a beautiful summer weekday. It was kind of a spontaneous thing, and asked me if I could go along, and I wasn't able to because I had a bit too much on the docket that day for work things. And they had a rather hilarious conversation that they reported to me afterwards about how Jeff's been doing this work for 25 years and housing is a bigger problem than it was when he started. What's he not doing right? It is just the case that it's getting harder, right? Everything costs more, whether that's real estate or the cost of building or materials. It's getting increasingly harder and harder. And what we're finding is that now it's not even just super low income people or low income people. Like the income of folks that we're helping is inching upward a bit on a median income perspective because of that. And increasingly, when we're talking with folks about coming to work for us or volunteering for us or how to support us, we make it really clear, like One Roof wouldn't exist if the housing market worked. Very little of what we do, we would need to be around to do if the housing market worked. Home buyer education and counseling is one of the things that we might still do. But many of the other things, if the system worked, we wouldn't need to be helping. So to talk about that a little bit more, depending on what batch of statistics you use, it's the case that homes have risen from 4 to almost 8% higher or faster, 4 to 7.6 times faster than incomes have since the 1960s. So that's pretty clear, right? Like if housing keeps going up like that, the only other variables in there are things like interest rates, which we know from the bump a few years ago really can make a big difference. But that cost of housing compared to what people are earning, that gap keeps getting bigger. And especially, since 2020, we've seen a 50% increase in home prices in our country, which is kind of unfathomable. I like to talk about how I do, but talk about how I'll be a bit surprised. I'm 55. If I do this work another 10-ish or so years, I'll be surprised if we can continue to create community land trust homes the whole time because it just keeps costing more. I keep wondering when the public, bodies, which provide most of our capital funding, say, "Nah, this is ridiculous. This just costs too much." I hope that doesn't happen, but it's a little bit hard to think it might not if we don't change some things. And the last bullet point, a third of the people that live in this country are paying more for housing than they ought to, which is about 30% of your income is considered to be a reasonable amount. That's an enormous part of our population for whom the market's not working. This statistic shows sort of like the median income buyer in the country, how many of them are able to purchase a house with just the means that they have. And you can see over time, it just keeps dropping. The percentage of people that can buy a house without assistance. this one really bummed me out. I've got children that are 29 and 26, and the average age of a buyer since 2014, so basically the last 10 years, has risen from 31 to 40 in age when folks are able to buy. We know, of course, because of systemic racism and housing policies through the years, that certain segments of our population, particularly BIPOC folks, but also folks with different sexual orientations, pick a reason to be discriminated against. Folks who haven't had access to as much income, haven't had access to the housing market. It's harder for them. The 1968 was when the Fair Housing Act was passed. That was not that long ago. And before that, it was perfectly legal to do lots of discriminatory things relative to people buying homes. The other piece is, super sadly, homelessness keeps rising. My wife Michelle and I moved to town to work and live at Fishes Catholic Quarter 31 years ago. And when we came to town, a guest at Dorothy Day House typically could get a house or could get into rental housing within 4 to 6 weeks of moving in. Now it's more like 6 to 8 months, and often longer. So that's just a dramatic change in how that works, just in the availability of housing. So I'll talk quickly about our work now. Curious, do folks know about the Community Land Trust program? I'll go through that a little bit quicker, but effectively we've got about 375 Community Land Trust homes in our service area, which is largely Duluth, but surrounding communities. And then we also have homes in Grand Rapids now and in Grand Marais. That's the bulk of the single family housing development that we do is Community Land Trust focused. That's the case because it lasts longer, the affordability, right? So when someone buys a land trust house, that house will be affordable for the next buyer. I'll talk a bit about that more later. We have done some housing for folks at a little bit higher income, but our preference is to primarily do community land trust development when it comes to single family homeownership. We do multifamily development as well. The most recent project of significance we finished in town was Brewery Creek Apartments across from the hillside, the co-op in the hillside. We've got another project that'll be coming online this spring, going into construction about a block away from there as well. Buyer education and counseling work. We typically see about 250 households a year go through the home buyer education classes. And we have been adding about 150 households a year to our caseload of clients that are doing the counseling. The counseling can take anywhere from a couple months to a few years, depending on how ready that household is and what kind of work they have to do to get ready to be able to qualify to buy a house. And then, excuse me. I'm good.
There's cough drops back in my corner that are nice too.
Thank you. The tenant landlord connection is a program we've been operating for close to 10 years now, and that one provides education for landlords and property managers and tenants, and we also do troubleshooting for everybody in that camp. So if a landlord is puzzled at what to do with a tenant or vice versa, they can call us and we can walk them through how they might resolve the situation, let them know what their rights are, what their responsibilities are. We find that there's more success in sort of resolving situations if we make sure everybody involved understands what their rights and responsibilities are, instead of just advocating for one side or the other. We get to a more lasting resolution, which is why we're doing the work in the first place. And we'll also do mediation if the troubleshooting doesn't quite cut it. Sometimes that happens even at the courthouse to avoid evictions. And then we do lending of a variety of types, but the primary two are down payment assistance to help folks purchase a home, and loans to help people fix up their homes. So we're a community development financial institution, which is a designation of the Treasury Department that allows us to apply directly to the feds for that funding. And then we have a construction company common ground construction. They primarily do work for our community land trust program. At this point, most of it's renovation of homes that we're bringing into the trust. So talking a bit about the community land trust, the way that I like to think about it is that we're providing a product on the market that folks could not afford otherwise. So they're getting a 30 to 40% discount on the market value of a house. And that in exchange for that, this buyer family agrees to pay it forward, meaning that when they sell the house in the future, it will be affordable to the next buyer and available only to lower income buyers, right? And so the way that works effectively is if someone paid $100,000 for a house and it was worth $200,000, if we say 10 years pass and the property grew in value by another 100,000, which is not unrealistic in recent times, 25% of that $100,000 increase in value would be added to what they paid for the house in the first place, and that would be the effective cost of the next house or the next buyers to purchase the house. So it would go on the market for about $125,000. A little bit of a simplification, but only a little bit. So, but this is actually the thing that sort of got me jazzed about having a career in housing, was this notion that we could do something today that was going to last beyond us. That, back to the systems conversation about the housing situation in our country, this is a system tweak that, if we could do it more broadly, could make a big difference for the long term. This will give you a little bit of an example. The house initially was purchased in 2010, resold in 25. You can see that the initial market value was 112, was 200,000 when it resold, and the community investments was about 33,000 when it was sold the first time, and then the second time that value had grown up to 50,000. So the bottom line is really the one to focus on. It was originally a $79,000 purchase. Then when it resold, it was 150,000. So definitely things are going up, but the percentage of median income of the buyer was able to be about the same because of the resale formula. Yeah.
You say new windows for the kitchen. I was thinking about that. Thinking of a homeowner, not just homeowner I know who's in lots of components of their house, and I was wondering how that figured in the resale. Because it's a kind of a different, place than it was when they bought it in terms of the system and other stuff.
Yeah, it's complicated. We have a qualified capital improvements section in our lease for the land, which allows for certain improvements that are made to be appraised, and then the value of that added to what their price will be. Other things are maintenance and don't so much add value. So if one remodeled their kitchen, that adds value. If one replaces their roof, that doesn't add so much value. So that's kind of how we walk through that, if that makes sense. This one's kind of fun because it's a house that we helped somebody buy in 2001, and it's resold now 3 different times, and the affordability maintained right along. So this one house has now served 4 families, which I just think is marvelous. That's why we're doing it this way. So I won't walk you through all of those scenarios, but it is working. In a lot of parts of the country, they talk about the community land trust model. We like to talk about it as a practice because it's something we're actively doing and it's working. We're getting better at it. So a big piece of them, which is important to understand, is that the permanent affordability comes with responsibility as well. So if we're helping folks that are not necessarily having an easy time buying a house, many of those folks might have other factors in their life that make it the case that we should be around to help support them in their homeownership journey after they've purchased. So it is a piece of what we do, is to be around. So we not only manage the resales, but if somebody needs help figuring things out, if they hit a bump in the road economically and they don't think they can buy any or continue to own their home, we'll help them figure out what the best thing is for them to do. We can maybe help them stay in their house. Sometimes we help them leave more gracefully than they otherwise might be able to leave, if that makes sense. Yeah, the upshot is that the foreclosure rate for folks that buy a land trust house is significantly lower than the foreclosure rate of folks in the market. And that's not an accident. It's for two reasons. One is we're there on the front side to make sure that they're getting into a manageable situation, right? And then the second is we're there to help if they hit bumps in the road along the way. This is probably my favorite slide, except for the kid on the very front. But this shows the bottom line is the number of homes that we've added per year. The middle line is the total number of land trust homes, and the top line is the number of households that we've served. And so you can see, because we're doing it this way, we're serving more households with the resources that we take to make the homes affordable than we otherwise would be able to. Here's some examples of homes we've built over the years. These were a while back in the Lincoln Park neighborhood. These are in Hawk Ridge Estates. These are some of the homes we've been building more recently. I'm super excited about not trying to build homes that look like all the old homes in the neighborhoods. I just think it's fun to build something a bit more modern, and you know, things change over time. So I really like these houses a lot. I think they're super livable, and it's been fun to push the design envelope a bit.
Are those in Morgan Park or those Riverside?
Some of those are in the Fairmont neighborhood, and then some are, I think, sure exactly if it'd be Raleigh, but sort of right next to the zoo, below the DWP, are the white ones. The other ones are across Grand. So,
Jeff, how many square feet are those?
Those are about 1,100 square feet. So, yeah.
I just told you this in case you want to ask.
This is a acquisition rehab house that we did in Lakeside a bunch of years back.
Adjustment I need
Sure.
to make. It turns out that we need to be sharing with the Zoom audience, and so I am going to do that now. Oh, yeah. Share.
That? No, I'm okay. I just.
Are we on the right one now? Is this?
Yep.
Okay. And we have this to go. Hopefully that'll be.
Yeah, so this was a house we acquired in Lakeside and then renovated. I think we go forward.
I know you went one for you.
I don't seem to be able to advance the slides.
Yeah.
There we go. So I like to say that after we finish a house, the snow melts and the sun comes out. It's not always true. But the ACT rehab is what we've been doing a ton of since about 2010. We stopped building during the foreclosure crisis, and then now we're building again. But it's basically when things change in the market, we evolve and figure out how to keep helping folks buy houses. So it looks different depending on what's going on in the market. Presently, we're doing a lot less work to houses than I'd like to do, just because it costs so much to buy them. that we're not able to do as much work to them. They're much improving as we would otherwise want. We're still ending up with a good product. It's just that the houses we're buying have to be in better shape than they sometimes have been. Because the junky ones cost almost as much as the nearly livable ones. So resales are a big part of what we're doing these days in terms of number of people that we're helping. This is one of my favorite families of all time. The boy on the left is about as old as my son. This is a very old photo, but just a lovely family. I believe Peter was washing dishes at Chester Creek Cafe, or cooking there when they bought their house, and Lindsay was working at the Global Village. So, folks doing super entry level job, but a family that with the land trust help could participate fully in the housing economy and buy a house, and yeah, they're still living there. So. One of the things we've been up to in the last bunch of years is trying to push the envelope a bit in terms of figuring out how to address different parts of the housing crisis that if we don't do something different, who's going to? So early during the pandemic, we pulled together a group of folks to talk about how could we build some sort of housing that would be livable, quality, a good place for community, but also a lot less expensive than what's getting built presently. And so we pulled together other housing developers, service providers, the Housing Authority, City of Duluth, architects, and we came up with what we called initially the new model, and subsequently, when we actually were able to build it, we called it Plover Place. But it provides housing for 24 individuals, and it's up on Palm and Robin Street, and it came in at about $160,000 per unit, which is less than half of what it would cost in a typical project that would get funded by the state these days. So we're also working with at least 2 other congregations in town, exploring could we build something on land that they own, which has been really fun to be part of the Stepping That Up project, and just working to see, what other ways could we do housing in this environment. The apartments are dormitory sized in terms of how big they are. So there's room in each one for a bed. There's a lot of storage that we've got built in. They have a toilet, a sink, a shower, and then a modest area for doing some cooking. And then there's a bigger cooking area outside of the units in the main area. This is a Brewery Creek Apartments, 52-unit building in the hillside that we finished a year and a half or so ago. And the top 2 floors are for younger people that have been homeless. Lifehouse does services on one of the floors, and the Human Development Center does service on the top floor. But it's really heartening because many of those young folks have children already. And if we can stop the cycle of homelessness by helping those folks have stability, helping their kids have stability, that feels like a good way to sort of intervene on the social side of helping things be better housing-wise and economically speaking for folks in our community. The other interesting characteristic about helping sort of young adults is they have higher ceilings than folks like me in terms of they have more ability to grow. They can still get some education, so that's just been a really heartening project to be part of. That one took about 10 years. I think Freiberger just came in, and he was probably on our board when we approved going forward with buying property for that. It took way too long. Part and parcel of doing projects, especially ones that happen in challenging areas. So this was a long blighted city block, and so turning that into something that's not that is even harder than just taking a green field piece of property and building something. Decker Dwellings is up by Schneiderman's Furniture. That's a 42-unit family housing project. I think in 2022, maybe 21. Grayview is a project we're working on, also in the hillside in cahoots with Essentia Health and the Sisters of St. Scholastica. So where the helicopter pad, the old one was on 4th Street, in the hillside, this is above that on the upper half of that block. And that'll be a project for seniors, and on the ground floor, walking out on the lower level will be childcare that the YMCA is going to be operating. We're also just closed in December on 24 units of redevelopment housing in Grand Marais. So some of the only affordable family housing in Grand Marais. We'll push that into construction probably in March, and it'll only be a 6-month or so project in terms of timeline on construction. Those are the two bigger things we have bubbling at present. So hopefully we have enough time to do this. I think we do. But I'm kind of curious increasingly of like, how can we all think about housing, and what we might be able to do. Of course, you can put money to things, and if you're able to do that, that's wonderful, and we're grateful. The QR code here works if you're into that sort of thing too. Other ways that people can help is to share leads on land. We've gotten quite a bit of land charitably either donated or sold to us at a discount. Same with homes, same with apartment buildings. And this year we're looking for a new office space because we found out in October that the city has got other plans for the office building that we're in. So we're feverishly looking for other places to be because we have a year to find something different and move in there. So any leads would be appreciated, and if we're able to find a building to purchase, we may be doing a smallish capital campaign to make that affordable for us longer term. This next one is a big piece of what I think we need to be challenging ourselves to do, and that is being, instead of a NIMBY, a YIMBY, figuring out how to be supportive of new housing projects that are happening. Personally, I don't subscribe to the mantra that any housing built is good housing. At the super high end of the market, the time it takes to trickle down isn't really going to make a difference here. But frankly, a lot of housing we should be supporting. An example, and if I pinch anybody on the nose here, I'm sorry, but I'm offering this with an open heart, and I think, you know, we need to be thinking broadly and challenging ourselves about how we're thinking. But I believe it was last spring, maybe late winter, when there was a bit of a brouhaha in the community about the a condo project that was being planned for Woodland Avenue across from Hartley. And the price point of those units would make a difference in our community from a trickle down perspective. That would be higher than the families that we're helping. But those folks who are moving into those would be vacating housing that very likely could be affordable to other folks. And maybe more importantly, the density associated with that project is something that we need to be trying to figure out how to get here in our community, because we're running out of land, right? So we need to put more units on the land that we have available. And I think in the same vein, I just am increasingly saddened by how polarized we can be in our community, even if we agree on 85%, 90% of things, we can still be just downright nasty in public dialogue about things that we've got to do better. If we're going to really come up with new ideas that help us have a stronger community, that help us make sure everybody has a good place to call home, we've got to figure out how to get along better. And I started to talk about that more because I'm hard pressed to find anybody on city council that doesn't think the work that One Roof is doing is useful and good. But by goodness, those folks sure do know how to fight with each other when they agree about so many other things. And I think like the way forward on that if I'm true to sort of what makes sense to my heart and my values, is that we need to figure out how to be more curious with folks that we disagree with, and how do we get to something that we can have common consensus on.
Has it already been decided, Teresa, what Essential's gonna do with that big green space now and Fourth?
On the lower side of 4th Street,
Sure.
I believe Essentia would like to have the U of M Medical School facility that's planned to come to Duluth at some point there. But there is a lot of other land that we're hoping to do some more housing with Essentia on, because they definitely reduced their footprint quite a lot with the new facility. So.
Presented to the city council what you presented today.
Not yet.
You have to make such a case. I hope you do that.
Thank you for the encouragement. It's on the list of New Year's resolutions to figure out how to talk a bit more about this. So you're my test case. But yeah, I have talked with individual city councilors, and I'm hoping to figure out how to actually have some conversation with Kathy Heltzer, who's a bit of a political and part of your community. Yeah, we've already had a quick chat about trying to dial that conversation up.
Complete with your slide presentation, of course. She's giving you a hand, but yeah.
It's the best.
This year I joined the board of CHUM, so I'm learning a lot about housing, but one of the things that has changed over the years, I used to interact with my job earlier, is that the shelter there, the regular shelter is essentially housing for people. They only take people in the daytime now who are there at night, and so basically people live there all the time, so the new space at Damiano lets people keep their own beds if they're in there, but it's just a reflection of how difficult, because people used to stop in and leave, and they can't, because they're really difficulty finding a place to go. Then probably one income level lower than you serve, but it's reflective of, again, what John Cole said at the memorial service on house was, we've known for 10 years about this shortage in Duluth, and 10 years ago, probably or more, Steve O'Neill was saying in a decade, so it's that worse. So it's appreciate the work has to be done at many levels, but I have to more acutely aware of how we do this by visiting that office.
Yeah, it's gotten significantly harder for folks, right? And I think a bit more history. I believe it was in the 70s, early 70s, early mid 70s, when we started the process of locking folks with mental health challenges up, right? And so what our country didn't do, because arguably that's a more humane situation, is to folks being locked up for years and years and years and years is just sad and whatnot. But what was supposed to accompany the change of that practice of institutionalizing folks was community health centers that would be, in around the country, places where folks could come for support, for community, for mental health services, and that piece of it never got built. And so it's been a slow slide into this situation. So there's lots of factors, right? There's the housing affordability factor. There's how do we do mental health in our country. It's not just a simple one cause.
Thank you. Anecdotally, it seems that over the past, say, 50 years, a lot of houses, small single family houses, have been purchased by parents for their children to be in when they're in college. So is that actually true? Is that something that's been happening over the past 5 decades or so? And
Yes.
okay, and so that's then, I guess, that's contributed to the lack of housing for single families?
Yeah, it is definitely the case that if we could build more student housing, we could use some of the housing stock for housing families again. That is true.
And then, I'm not sure I understood what you said about, or what you were implying about, moves to try and build more housing in Duluth with parkland. And, but do you have an opinion, about some of the recent decisions that the city and city council has made on our land use for housing? I'm using air quotes, housing, and taking it away from parkland. I think it's kind of complicated, I'm guessing, but can you synthesize your thoughts, or do you need to say it's too complicated to answer right now?
I mean, I'd start with it's complicated. I would also offer that a few thoughts. I don't think the current way the conversation was queued up was very smart. um, there was wisdom lacking in how the process has been nudged along recently by the administration. I thought the previous administration did a better job of running a public process and conversation about what to do with the Lester Park golf course in particular. What else would I say? If I'm honest, I think we have a ridiculous amount of parkland per capita here, and it's wonderful. Big reason why my family stayed in Duluth, and it doesn't seem crazy to me to contemplate doing some housing at Lester Park. I think we need to do the process well, and we need to do it transparently, and I think there's tons of potential for adding quite a lot of housing there and preserving most of the green space, but it has to be done. It won't be easy because it's super expensive to build something, and there's a lot of infrastructure that has to be pushed in utilities wise to do something there. But I think it's possible, and I think we need to do a better job of having conversations about it, a better job of process.
One more question, maybe? Yeah.
When Plover Place opened, I learned a lot about how to keep maintaining the the whole facility and everything. And I didn't know before that one of always, or most organizations always partner with a service provider. In that case, I think it was the Salvation Army.
Yes, Salvation Army.
How does that, how do you start off trying to find a partner in that sort of?
Yeah, it's different every time. When we did the project for veterans by Menards in West Duluth, the city asked us to get involved in that. The community development manager at the time. That was a partnership with the Center for Veterans. They didn't really have the chops to do the project themselves, but they needed the space and we needed the housing. Steve O'Neill Apartments happened. I was talking with Jim Soderberg, who was the director at Chum at the time, and Center City was also trying to do a family project at the time, and so we ended up linking arms and working together on that project. We also teamed up with Center City on Gateway. That was an example of before we had enough capacity and track record to do a project of that scale on our own. That was the same case with Steve O'Neill Apartments, actually. But I had a a bit of a vision for how Gateway could happen, and we had some horsepower to put toward that vision, and Center City bought into the vision but didn't have the horsepower because they were doing stuff in other parts of the state. So we teamed up on that one. So it really is different in every case. And Salvation Army, they were willing and able to sort of take on that project from a operational standpoint. And so yeah, it's every time it's different. We're always looking for to do a project like that. Presently, the next Plover Place might happen on some church property in West Duluth. Is it a community out there that's been really interested in doing some housing, and it would be housing for men coming out of incarceration, which would be great. So
Thank you so
I
much.
think we're out of time. Really nice to be with you all. I appreciate the chance to talk with you. Yeah, have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you again, and I learned so much from your presentation. I just think the community land trust model, that is something that I didn't really understand. Your explanation was so good, and that's just so powerful, and that idea that one roof housing wouldn't exist today if our housing system actually works. So really pitching in to create these solutions is just awesome. I'm going to be a
sorry we're here.
sorry. Thank you again, Jeff. And we have a great lineup for the rest of the month as well. And just to make a pitch for next week, we are going to be hearing from Loaves and Fishes, helping unsheltered Dulutheans. So sort of like the flip side of all of the work that you're doing. And I know you guys are probably collaborators, right? That's a whole other story.
The Loaves and Fishes houses are land trust houses.
Okay, all right, that's brilliant, that's brilliant. The Loaves and Fishes houses are land trust houses, for those of you who couldn't hear that. Okay, are you willing to stay around for a little bit in case people want to ask you any questions? And thanks to everybody out there in Zoom land, and we will see you next week.
I only had a few video recordings to bring from